The interesting thing is what's happening, I think, to the woke world, if you like, which has been a sort of new form of fascism, albeit ironically driven by people who would say fascism is their number one enemy. I watched the Golden Globes last night, for example, an event that was taken off air last year in a row about racial bias and so on in the institution that puts it on. And it came back on, really fascinating to me. I watched the whole thing for 3 hours. No political speeches, no virtue signaling, no grandstanding. People basically did what Ricky Gervais told them to do 3 years ago, which is get up, thank your agent, and sit down and just celebrate making movies or TV shows. Is this a sign, Jordan, do you think? I felt that there is a movement going on now of a real backlash from perhaps a majority that's been silent till now, that's just said enough, and that even Hollywood has woken up to the reality that people who watch the movies and TV shows, they don't want to hear this stuff all the time.
Well, we put politics first and foremost, and partly the reason we did that was because any higher aims in some ways collapsed. I suppose that's part and parcel of the famous death of God. If what's highest spiritually and transcendentally disappears, then something else steps up to take its place. And in our society, that's either been a nihilistic bent that's very powerful or politicking in general. And the problem with that is that you're supposed to render unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. And the mistake that entertainers make is that they regard what they do as mere entertainment. Hollywood stars and all the people who were involved in producing the narratives that entice and compel us, they're serving a master who's far higher than anything merely political. And when they bend their art to serve a political master, they distort the higher to the lower, to their own detriment. People aren't, so that's the philosophical problem with an artist becoming political. It's art supersedes politics. The art should never be subordinated to serve the political, because then it gets, not only does it get propagandistic, it gets dull and contemptible. No one cares what a star thinks about Trump, especially when what they have to say about Trump can be said just as coherently by your demented neighbor. But the fundamental problem is that we don't understand that the story is the thing. And these artists, movie stars, who are so privileged and often so talented and have this wonderful opportunity to shape the culture from which politics is downstream, have forgotten how sacred, you might say, their mission truly is. And some of that's even a false humility. I suppose many Hollywood stars believe that their luxurious and privileged life isn't paid for by the grueling necessity of having to make a movie, which is more something like a great adventure. And so they feel guilty and feel that they have to serve something real. But the problem with that is that, well, who said the political was real, first of all? And second, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a profound storyteller. In fact, apart from being a profound artist, and perhaps profound spiritually, I can't think of anything that is more clearly dedicated to the highest possible cause. And when we forget that, we destroy art, and we destroy the people who make it, and we undermine our culture. And it's possible, as you pointed out, given this pullback, let's say at the Golden Globes, that the storytellers are starting to realize that subordinating their venture to the idiot political, especially a victim-victimizer narrative, which is the lowest form of the political, is counterproductive in every possible way, including financially, hence Disney.
Yeah. I mean, and also I was struck by the juxtaposition of the Globes with the rich and famous turning up and celebrating their art, which is great. And I totally agree with you that the art actually is a great calling. It's also a great escapism when times are difficult. In the middle of a pandemic and cost of living crisis and wars raging again in Europe and so on, to be able to escape into the world of television or movies is actually really important for people. It's good for people's mental health. But back in Britain, we've had this dreadful scandal involving people who are not rich and famous. They're just ordinary, hard-working members of the public who were running little post office branches, delivering the mail to people. And because of a faulty Japanese computer system, suddenly hundreds and hundreds of them were accused of fraud because the computers were malfunctioning. And they were, in many cases, put in prison. They were all given criminal convictions. Many suffered appalling mental health. Many lost everything they had. 4 of them committed suicide. An absolutely appalling scandal. And yet here we are 20 years later with it still unresolved, no accountability. The woman who ran the post office at the time got honoured for her work, not punished. The senior politician whose job it was to oversee this was so dismissive that he's now being lambasted by the victims, but remains a leader of a major party in Britain. And you've got this Japanese company, Fujitsu, who have seen no reason so far to offer any financial compensation to these poor people. What do you make of that scandal?
Well, the first thing I would say is that the rush that we're all engaged in to automate everything means that we can automate our willful blindness and our stupidity. And generally, willful blindness and stupidity are in more plentiful supply than wisdom. And we're in terrible danger of automating tyranny and what? Yeah, well, willful blindness is the best way to put it. You know, all these systems that we're developing are essentially equivalent to the unconscious mind. They're the implicit structures that shape our world. And you see this making itself manifest everywhere. So your country, the UK, is completely covered with closed-circuit TV cameras, right? We're automating, we're risking automating a kind of tyranny that's absolutely unimaginable. And the problem with that is that, especially once you get AI involved, you actually don't know what's being automated. You don't know what biases and errors are being built into the system. And you're foregoing the possibility that those accused by such systems will be able to hold someone human capable of suffering for their sins, let's say, responsible for the injustice. This is an unbelievably major source of current threat. You know, I've been using ChatGPT and Elon Musk's Grok as research assistants continually over the last few months, and they're unbelievably intelligent systems and remarkably helpful as research assistants. It's like having a team of competent master's students in multiple disciplines, more or less at your beck and call. But they also lie constantly. They're biased, probably because they've been trained on a surfeit of recent publications. They're politically biased in a way that's absolutely unconscionable. And we genuinely risk automating our proclivity towards slavishness and tyranny. And that's going to become a much worse problem. It's going to threaten us digitally because our digital identities are already controlled by quasi or half-automated machines, and it's going to threaten us directly, as it did in the case of these postal workers. So, you know, increasingly you can't move from country to country without going through a facial recognition system. You know, you're monitored by systems that will increasingly be beyond our understanding and beyond our control. And we have to step so carefully to put those systems into place properly that it's hardly imaginable. And we don't have the legal framework even in place now to ensure that that's going to be possible. Your digital self, and mine as well, have virtually no protection. And as you extend yourself out into the virtual world, that is you, just as your reputation can be destroyed virtually. You're extended now into this virtual space. And who has ownership over the you that exists in this virtual space is by no means clear.